National Legislative Director John Risch.
Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for coming out this morning after the all-nighter party, or a party till 10 o'clock. It was a great time, and getting up and getting out here at 8 o'clock sharp is impressive, and it shows your commitment to our organization. Yesterday we had a number of elections across the country. We come up a little bit short in Ohio by less than 1% of the vote. We're a special election at a strong Republican district. It was Pat Tiberi, a relatively moderate Republican, where Donald Trump won by 11 percentage points. A young man named O'Connor took on a sitting state senator. President Trump, Vice President Pence went out there numerous times to try and prop up their candidate, their sitting state senator, and he won narrowly by about 1 percentage points. But we did our part. Stu Gardner and Ralph and his team did their part out there in Ohio. We did many pieces of direct mail. We did emails, phone call-ups. We did our part to get our members out to vote. We came up a little short. That was a special election. There's going to be a rematch in November. Had we won that, there would have been a little bit more joy this morning, but we have some great joy about another election. The other election took place in Missouri, where the right-wing folks passed something called Right to Work, which I like to call Right to Work for Less, an effort to undermine the unions and workers' ability to address their pay and fringe benefits. That was put on the ballot. And the Republicans there in Missouri said, well, what can we do? What kind of conniving can we do to make sure that labor isn't successful on this referral of the state law we passed repealing Right to Work? So they decided to put it on the ballot in August. And they decided that labor needed a no vote instead of a yes vote. And they decided all these things to try and stack the deck against organized labor and working men and women in Missouri. Deliberate, intentional, whatever they could do unfair to try and tilt the deck in their favor. And the good news is that ballot initiative went no more than 2-1. Right to Work in Missouri has been repealed. When you take it out and people understand what the issue is of right to work, when they understand that the very essence of it, whether it be the Janus decision or right to work in the various states or the efforts at the national level, when they fully understand that this is really an effort to undermine the abilities of unions to get better wages and fringe benefits and improve safety at the job site, when they understand that when you enact these types of laws that wages go down, workplace injuries go up, income inequality ever widens. When they understand this, they vote the right way. They vote for themselves, they vote for their unions, they vote for the ability to do something in the workplace. But it's tough. In the Missouri race, the Koch brothers sent out these direct mails that the Kansas City newspaper, Kansas City, Missouri newspaper, criticized in their editorial, showed this working fella, probably 55 years old, haggard. He said, we need to vote yes to protect the rights of workers. Deceptiveness. We see it all over the place. But even with all the deceptiveness, even with all the ways in which they tried to tilt the playing field to their favor, all of that we won in Missouri. And I see a trend, I see a movement across this country, whether it be the teachers in West Virginia and Arizona and Colorado and other places standing up even when they don't have the right to strike, even when they don't have the right to collective bargaining, standing up and demanding and getting better wages. I think the tide is turning. I hope the tide is turning because we can't go the other direction much longer. The income inequality in this country where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And I can make that statement. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And I can make that statement to the most conservative people I know, and they look at me and they say, yeah, you're right. We agree with you on that one. So what do you do about it? I was at a meeting one time with my own U.S. Senator Heidi Heitkamp. And where's she from again, John? North Dakota. North Dakota, and she was saying, oh, I had a meeting with Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway, and they own the BNSF Railroad and whatnot, and Warren Buffett said that what we need to do is expand the earned income tax credit, direct payments to low-wage workers from the government. And I said, no. I said, Senator Heitkamp says, what we need to do is raise the minimum wage. And I looked at Senator Heitkamp and I said, you're both wrong. You're both wrong. We don't need government welfare payments for workers. We don't need this mandate of a higher minimum wage if we increase workers' ability to negotiate and demand better wages in the workplace. What we need is better opportunities to workers to go out and fend for themselves and demand better wages. More power in the workplace is what gets rid of income inequality in this country. That's what does it. So, that wasn't in my prepared remarks. So let's get on to those. I'm going to talk about some overall things about what's happening in Washington, D.C., and rambling thoughts about a number of things. But the first thing I want to talk about is automation. And if you were at the legislative workshop and other workshops, this issue of automation has been a big deal. We have a new Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, every time she gives a speech, and I'm with her, every time she gives a speech, one of the first things she says is, we got to do automation. It's the ticket to increase safety, it's a ticket to efficiencies, it's a ticket for America in the transportation industry. And that means not just cars, it means trucks, it means buses, and it means trains. FRA recently announced or published in the Federal Register, Federal Railroad Administration, that they wanted to comment on what are the impediments to automation. What are the impediments in the rail industry to automation? We, of course, filed comments. John filed comments on behalf of our union, John Prevasich, and then we sent it out to our members urging them to file comments. There were over 3,300 people filed comments on automation in the railroad industry. Almost all of them said, don't you dare go to single person or no person operation. It's unsafe and it's unjust. Our comments clearly said that the only safe way to operate a train in America is with a certified conductor and a certified locomotive engineer. End of story. There were some interesting comments filed. One was by a 9th grader in West Virginia, goes to a Christian school in West Virginia. Very eloquent comments. One was from the Department of Public Utilities in California. A very lengthy description that increased automation doesn't require fewer people. It actually requires more people and more training because of the complexities that are involved with all these electronics in the cab. And we've protested to the FRA, urged them to investigate this issue of task overload with whether it be trip optimizer, leader, PTC screen, and all of this stuff, having the conductor write down everything, and before you know it, no one's looking out the window. So we filed comments. The administrator told me himself he was surprised at the number of comments that came in and how strong they were. This issue of automation, of course, the Association of American Railroads and a number of railroads filed comments saying, oh, this is the future. And Ed Hamburger, the head of the Association of American Railroads, even went so far as said, well, automation was coming. It may even include the total automation of the locomotive, and many of the jobs, just like blacksmiths, will go away. That's their side. And that's what we're up against. I was in Wall Street in April, and I go up there annually. It's called Wolf Research, and you can Google it. They're the big transportation research group. And I'm the only labor guy there, and I go there, and they ask me questions, and I'm in panels, and the first thing, of course, they ask is about automation and single-person or no-person crews. And I'm at the panel, and I explain to them, and one guy starts kind of accosting me that I and our union is the impediment. We're the ones that are stopping this great efficiency gain in train operations where railroads could make so much more money. And I looked out at this crowd, and there's a couple hundred of these, I call them the money changers, the Wall Street hedge funds, big mutual funds and whatnot. I said, it's not just me. Look around this country. There's been a number of states that have taken action. They're not going to allow these trains coming through 1 and now 2 mile long and longer without somebody on them, without 2 people on them so they can cut a crossing, things of that nature. It's not just me. Look at the states around the country. Maryland just passed a bill requiring 2 people in every cab in the locomotive. And the Republican governor, he vetoed it. Last year, Nevada passed a bill requiring 2 people on every train. And the Republican governor vetoed it. California, the year before, passed a bill requiring 2 people on every train, but they had a Democratic governor. And you know what? He signed the bill. In the state of California, it's the law of the land that you have to have a minimum of 2 people on every train. There are other efforts in other states, but I want to recognize, and none of them are here, but Larry Casekamp, our state director in Maryland, for his tremendous effort there. Jason Doring, our state director in Nevada, who do incredible part-time director that got that bill through. And then J.P. Jones and Mike Anderson in California getting that bill through. That's what we need more of. There's been efforts in other states across the country. They've been coming up a bit short, got close. I've got my own local member here, Brian Kazuriak in North Dakota. They came up 2 shorts in the deep red state of North Dakota. So this is an issue that the public, wherever we poll, the public is on our side, and we're going to keep taking it forward. We're going to keep playing offense. We're going to take it to the states. We've got bills in both houses of the Congress. Got a bill in the Senate. We have 12 co-sponsors. We've got a bill in the House sponsored by a Republican, former Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Chairman, Don Young of Alaska. He's the prime sponsor of the Republican. We have 118 co-sponsors in the House today. And we keep working hard. And how do we actually get it across the finish line, these bills in Congress or the state legislatures or whatever? How do we do it? If you look at our staff in Washington, D.C., it's I, Greg Hines, Eric Seahan, we work the Hill. There's 535 members of Congress. And for the most part, we have relationships with a lot of these folks, and we talk with them, talk to their staff and whatnot. But who they're most attentive to, who they listen to most, are not the alligators in the swamp, the lobbyists. We have relationships. We use our PAC in the best way possible. Who they listen to most are their constituents. When their constituents meet with them, whether it be one-on-one, bring them to a local meeting, or whatever, they're all ears. And they're particularly all ears on election year. We've got 90 days or 89 days until the next election. These congressmen and senators are all ears. I'll give you a couple examples. Steve Simpson's not here. I saw him last night. He had to leave early this morning. But he's a general chairman on the Union Pacific in Texas. And Steve Simpson called me one day and he said, well, John, I just noticed across the street there's a sign, my congressman, Louis Gohmert. Louis Gohmert has got his office across the street. Do you think I should go talk to him about the crew bill? I said, I don't think you should. I think this is a great idea. And to give you some idea, Louis Gohmert is a member of the Freedom Caucus, and you could argue that he is the most conservative member of the United States Congress. Somebody might say somebody else, but at least he's in the running to be the most conservative member of the United States Congress. So Steve Simpson, I emailed him some material, went over, he didn't know if he'd meet with the staff or Congressman Gohmert himself, goes over, sets up a meeting, and it's Congressman Gohmert. He thought it'd be a 10, 15-minute meeting. Talked to him for more than an hour. Talked to him about inadequacy and National Mediation Board funding and all our issues. And you know what happened at the end of the meeting? Louis Gohmert signed on to the crew bill. How about that? It's because one person looked across the street, saw the sign, didn't say, oh, that's a Republican. They won't vote with us. Was not intimidated by that. He went across the street and met with them. Laid out our ideas, what we think is right and proper, and that's what we do every day in Washington, D.C., and let the chips fall where they may. We have to make the arguments. We have to get out. We have to talk to those folks, and nobody does it better than the folks that are living in their district. Those are the most effective lobbyists we have, our members and officers in the legislative districts. I got another example. One of our bus members, Sirocco Cerneras Hernandez, and I'm not very good with such names, but it's Sirocco Cerneras Hernandez. Are you here? She's a bus driver out of California. Well, anyway, she called the office and said, hey, Representative Cook, Republican of California, is having a town hall meeting. Should I talk to him about the crew bill? I said, of course you should talk to him about the crew bill. We sent her some stuff. She had a sit-down meeting after the town hall meeting, and he signed on the bill. That's what makes it work. You know, we do a lot of things at the national level, and we do what we can. We have what we call our Legislative Action Center. You can go on the website and click, 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 and send a message to your congressman. Good stuff. Email to your congressman. The problem is sometimes they get 1,000 emails a day. So if you think you clicked on that email, and boy, I did my part, I clicked on that email, it's not going to get us to the finish line. What we need is all of you keep an eye on the paper, maybe invite them to your local meeting, have an opportunity to reach out and try and meet with the congressman himself about this crew bill, about driver assault for bus drivers, all the issues we have, and try and meet with them personally. It's not me and Greg and Eric that's going to get this done. What it is, it's our members that are going to get this done, and we can help facilitate that. I gave it a speech almost just like this in Seattle in July. And, you know, I urged everybody to make contact with their congressman. About 5 days after the meeting, I look and there's a guy named Duncan Hunter signed on to the crew bill. Duncan Hunter of southern Orange County, California, very conservative area as far as California goes. So I called out to the California Legislative Board and I said, well, somebody meet with Duncan Hunter? Well, nobody that I know of. I said to the staff, I said, anybody here meet with Duncan Hunter recently? Nobody that I know of. I'm convinced after the talk in Seattle, somebody said, hey, Duncan Hunter is my guy, and went out and met with him, and he signed on to the crew bill. So that's an inspiration for everyone in this room. I don't know who your congressman is. I don't care how conservative or liberal they are. If they're not on the crew bill, get them on the crew bill. And you can check by going to our website, the Legislative Action Center, on whether or not your congressman is on the crew bill or not. You can check whether or not they're co-sponsoring the driver assault bill that will protect our bus drivers if and when it's passed. You could check their voting records. We have the entire voting record. It's the best thing ever. I'd send it out, but it's 535 members with lots and lots of votes. So it's best if you just go to the Legislative Action Center, type in your zip code, and you can check all those things that are happening in your congressional district and with your United States senators. Some other issues we're working on is we're trying to get hours of service coverage for yard masters. It's crazy that a switchman can work 5 days a week, 12 hours a day, then come in and do 2 double shifts at a yard master, then go right back and work 5 12s again, no days off. Yard masters, by and large, is about 20% maybe are covered by hours of service. We're trying to get yard masters hours of service coverage. In fact, we're going to try and pitch that. There'll be a markup on something transportation related in September, and we're going to go for that, what I call a technical correction. We've been working on transit funding and having very good success. The president, of course, was this transport or infrastructure president, $1 trillion on infrastructure. Every one of his budget proposals proposes to cut investment in transit, proposes to cut investment in Amtrak, proposes to cut investment in highways and bridges, but the Congress has stepped up. The Congress has stepped up with dramatic increases in transit, Amtrak, and even the National Mediation Board funding. We got about a 50% increase in arbitration funding in 2017 and continued in 2018, and the Senate is working on legislation now to move that forward to try and address some of this backlog of arbitration cases. I mentioned the driver assault legislation, and they were quite pleased. This issue of increased driver assault, more and more you read about it in the paper, happens on the passenger side, on our rail side. We had somebody shot in Chicago a little over a year ago. But on the bus side, it's really a difficult situation where I don't know what's happening. I call it an erosion of civility. People are becoming less and less civil. And what do we do about it? But there's drugs involved and all kinds of things. But anyway, we have a bill in the House. It was introduced by Grace Napolitano from California and co-sponsored by, she's a Democrat, and a guy named Katko from upstate New York, a Republican, a very influential Republican, that would try and deal with this issue. It would require bus companies to come up with plans and require that they work with their union representatives to deal with those plans on driver assault. It would require that they do some things to mitigate the opportunity of somebody to assault a driver. Might be a shield. Do some things, as possibly even automation with automatic. We're having problems with passengers will get out of the bus and walk in front of the bus, and the bus is designed in such a way you can't even see right in front of the bus, and people are getting struck by the bus, and the bus driver doesn't see them. So there's a lot of issues. So this bill would require that they do comprehensive plans and involve the union, and I'm pretty optimistic about it. It's bipartisan. We're getting more sponsors, co-sponsors all the time. But Eric Seahan, are you here? Eric's here, our staff guy, and Greg Reagan. Greg, are you here? Greg Reagan is with the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Both Eric and Greg worked hard to put this bill together, and if they're here, back there, thank you guys. They've taken the lead on this, and these are the guys that are working on it. And we're going to be giving a presentation to the bus folks in a little news. So I mentioned earlier we got all this increased funding, right? Good stuff. And the Republicans passed a bill to dramatically decrease taxes. Decrease taxes, increase funding, what's not to like? What's not to like? Only in America. We'll just get rid of our revenue base, undermine our revenue base, and dramatically increase spending. $70 billion a year alone for the military. We got increases in all kinds of things. And the tax cuts they came up with, they said, well, this is going to be for everybody. These tax cuts are for everybody. But if you look, I want to recognize Ben Nagy here. He's been around with the camera the whole time. And Ben did an excellent job in the last issue of the news. He's doing a wonderful job for us. But he did an excellent job in the last issue of the news. And the reason he worked on it was I started getting calls from people saying, well, I did my taxes for 2017, and my tax man has prepared this analysis for 2018, and I'm going to pay a lot more. We had one guy in Schmitty's his name, in Alliance, Nebraska, does 300 railroad workers' taxes. And Schmitty says, I'm doing these taxes, and when I look at the analysis, our operating guys, the guys that work over the road, are going to be paying a lot more. Some of them as much as $3,000 or more. And the reason that they're going to pay more is because they did away with what's called unreimbursed business expenses. And for operating railroad workers, that means you can't deduct your union dues anymore. You can't deduct any kind of clothes or shoes or specialized equipment. But most significantly, you can't deduct your unreimbursed meals at the other end of the terminal. Typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Johnny, national agreement provides for $10 for meals. $10 for meals. So you go to the away from home terminal and you're allowed $10 for meal. But the IRS might allow you $65 for meals. So when you do your taxes at the end of the year, you tally up all the days you were away, multiply it times $65, multiply it times $55 because you subtract the $10, and you get to deduct that. Well, granted, they did a couple other things. They doubled the personal exemption. So instead of a family getting $12,000, they get like $22,000 of standard deduction, excuse me. They doubled that, so that offset a lot of it, but not enough. There were limitations on state and local taxes that factored in, and in the end, you can read the front page of the news where one guy pays $900 more and another guy pays $3,000 more. Now, some guys that don't have children and are working like a road or yard job or something like that where they don't travel will probably get a bit of a tax cut. But the bulk of our members that are working road jobs will pay more. Because in addition to all that, the personal exemption, so if you have a wife and 3 children or whatever, you used to get $4,000 a piece for them. Now that's gone as well. So this tax cut that was good for everybody wasn't good for everybody. It wasn't well thought out. It was a unilateral decision. They had very few hearings. There was not one Democratic vote in favor of it. And unlike other major tax overhauls, if you go back through history, it happens about every 30 years, it was not bipartisan. It was a completely partisan deal. But what they really made the impact was when they reduced the taxes on corporations. They reduced the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. To be sure, our corporate tax system should have been overhauled. There's been a long time practice of hiding money overseas. There's been a long time practice of shifting money around to other companies. And there's some corporations in America just never pay taxes. General Electric is famous. As big as they've been for years, most oftentimes don't pay any federal tax whatsoever. You take a railroad, on the other hand, which doesn't have offshore things to load things off on. A lot of times railroads pay significant income tax. So the issue of federal taxes on corporations needed to be addressed. We supported it. I talked to the industry, and will support meaningful addressing the corporate income taxes. But at the very least, it should be revenue neutral. It should be revenue neutral. We shouldn't be adding more debt. You can rearrange things, get these guys that aren't paying anything to pay, and to get these guys that are paying the full amount a bit of a break. That's what made sense, but that's not what they did. They just blanketly reduced the doggone thing from 35% to 21% and came out and said, this tax cut is going to create economic prosperity. My own senator from North Dakota, John Hoeven, was on the Senate floor who said the reduction in corporate taxes from 35 to 21% will put $4,000 in the pockets of every worker in America. Every worker in America is going to get a $4,000 wage increase because of that. So I called his office after it passed. First of all, I talked to John. And I said, John, I'm expecting my $4,000. John says, you're not going to get $4,000. I said, well, wait a minute. My U.S. Senator was right on the Senate floor, says, I get like this $4,000. He said, you're not going to get it. So I called Senator Hoeven's office. I didn't just call his Washington office. I called every one of his satellite offices and said, hey, I need this message to go to Senator Hoeven. He has to interact with my employer because I haven't got the $4,000, and I need this $4,000. I was counting on this $4,000 as soon as I watched him on the floor. I mentioned it to my lovely bride. My lovely bride, Kathy's up front here, great supporter, right front row. And they were kind of distraught on the phone. And then I went on statewide talk radio in North Dakota, and I told the same story, and I said, everybody that's listening to this statewide radio show, if you haven't got your $4,000, you call Senator John Hoeven, and you ask him for that $4,000. He's got to go to your employer and help you get that $4,000. It's a fraud. It's a fraud that you're all going to get this $4,000. I didn't see any of the railroads passing out $4,000 checks. There were some companies that passed out $1,000 one-time events, and it was like this big thing, right? They're going to give them this little drop out of the bucket. But the good news is they took the death tax and they moved it from $11 million exemption to $22 million exemption. So you road guys in those big jobs, instead of this $11 million death tax exemption, you now get to hide $22 million of it. Give it up for the road guys and their inheritance tax extension, huh? I used to write a regular newspaper column, and I loved writing about taxes. As you can see, I kind of get into this stuff. But back in the 1990s, the Republicans changed the phrase from inheritance tax to death tax, saying that what a terrible thing, you're going to tax somebody upon their death. And my response whenever I wrote those columns was, what better time to tax a guy than when he's dead? Good time to do it. Much of this inheritance stuff, they always talk about these farmers can't pass on their farm. Baloney. We've not been able to find one single farm in America that's been affected by the death tax. Most of the stuff is appreciated property that has never been taxed. And what it does, it just passes on and enlarges more and more wealth. It concentrates more and more wealth in the hands of a few. And what it does, again, as I started out this talk about, it increases income inequality. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and things like this death tax, doubling of the death tax, makes it even worse. So what did the railroads really do with their money, 35% to 21%, all this prosperity they were going to create in the railroad industry with it? What did they do? Did they buy new locomotives? build new tracks? Did they give us each $4,000? No to all of those. The number one thing the railroads did with their newfound wealth, and you can see the clips across the country, the number one thing was they bought back stock. They bought back stock to increase the stock value, and who benefits from that? The largest stockholders are the hedge funds and the top corporate officers. They're the ones. Union Pacific announced they're going to buy back $21 billion. That's with a B now. $21 billion in stock over the next 3 years. $21 billion. And in the same article announced, plus, we're going to keep our capital expenditures. That's the money they invest in rail, money they invest in track, money they invest in locomotives and upkeep. We're going to keep that down to $3.3 billion annually. So what the Union Pacific is going to do is spend twice as much on buying back stock as they are investing in their company because of this bill, because of the tax law. And it's even going a little more than that. They're actually borrowing money to buy back stock, and it adversely affected their credit rating. And the pressure, and I don't even blame the Union Pacific corporate officers for all of it, because when I go up to Wall Street and see these guys, these hedge fund guys pressuring these corporate executives, everything is about what are you going to do to reduce capital and expenditures? What are you going to do to buy back your stock? What are you going to do to get rid of the second crew member? They even got an analysis on the second crew member in their handouts. What are you going to do? They're even tracking long trains. They're tracking long trains, encouraging these railroads to make the trains ever longer. And the other thing they do is they keep track of what's called the head count. This is the head count. I get these weekly emails with all this railroad analysis. It's the head count. So the CEOs of these railroads, after you have Hunter Harrison take over the CSX railroad, it put a lot of pressure on the other railroads to do similar things, to essentially cannibalize, reduce investment in the railroads and make everything all about the investors. So they passed these bills. Increased spending, reduced taxes, income. So they passed those. What effect did it have? You know, you heard this $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. The most recent analysis is that we'll be adding about $1 trillion annually to our debt. $1 trillion. Last July 4th was our 242nd birthday. America's 242nd birthday. We've been a country for 242 years. And in 242 years, we accumulated $20 trillion in debt. In the next 10 years, we're going to increase that by 50% to $30 trillion in debt. In 10 years, 242 years, 20, 252 years, we're going to be at 30. After this is all done, all of a sudden, Paul Ryan and a number of the leaders of the Congress said, oh, we've got to do something about this terrible debt. After they dug this big hole of cutting taxes and increasing, we've got to do something about this debt. So what do you suppose they thought they'd do? Do you think they'd go out to the people with the money or the corporate interests and whatnot, the folks that actually have money, and go after this fix? Wrong. Wrong-o. What they said was, and what they keep saying is, we have to do something about entitlements. These entitlements is something we have to do something about in order to address the debt and deficit spending we have. And the entitlements they're talking about are Social Security, and when they talk about Social Security, it's paired with railroad retirement. Tier 1 and Social Security are identical. They're paired. What they do to Social Security happens to railroad retirement. They're talking about Social Security, railroad retirement, Medicare, and Medicaid. So they say what we have to do, the way we get this debt, this terrible debt that's on our country under control, is we deal with these entitlements. You notice I didn't call Social Security or railroad retirement an entitlement. It's a pension plan. Something we paid into, something we pay a tremendous amount into for 30 and even 40 years. So we get a few years of something we earned and paid into after we retire. And the same is for Medicare. We pay into Medicare our whole working lives, and our employer pays on our behalf their portion in lieu of wages so that we have some modest health care plan once we retire. Of course, we'll have to buy a supplement because it's just a basic, fundamental health care plan when we retire. So what they're talking about reducing is something we already earned. It was a deal that's been made, and it's something we already earned. And they need to reduce it because of what they did as far as tax policy goes and spending policy. Well, the third thing I mentioned was Medicaid. That's the other thing. Well, you know, you can say, what the heck, Medicaid, that's just the health care for the poor. Why don't we just whack the poor? Now, the problem is 42% of all Medicaid dollars goes to nursing homes. A full 60% of all the people in nursing homes are on Medicaid. Medicaid pays their bills. Many of them are retired bus drivers. Many of them are retired railroad workers. Many of them just simply outlive their income, and their railroad retirement or their pension just won't cover the cost, and Medicaid has to step in. So the Republicans, what they did, the Budget Committee in the House side did recently, was they passed a budget bill out of the committee, passed a proposed budget for 2019 out of the committee that would cut some Medicare, but mostly $1.5 trillion in Medicaid over the next 10 years. And it's an incredible number because that's the same number they claim they cut taxes, $1.5 trillion. So the way they want to pay for this tax cut is to whack the folks in the nursing homes and poor folks' health care. Oh, let me talk about Amtrak just a little bit. We got a new president of Amtrak, Richard Anderson, good guy. How am I doing for time? I got about an hour left.
Just about.
We got a new president of Amtrak named Richard Anderson. Came off Delta Airlines. Bright guy. He's a go-getter. And there's some good news and bad news on Amtrak. Yeah, you know, he sent out some things relative to long-distance trains and comments on long-distance trains that we don't like. I mean, Amtrak is a national system. We need to keep it a national system. It generates national support when it's a national system. It provides jobs for our members, and it provides vital transportation to people across this country. He had one plan to deal with the Southwest Chief. That's the name of a train from Chicago to Los Angeles, where in the middle of it, instead of upgrading the track, he was going to just stop the train and put people on buses for 50 miles and then, or for 4 hours, and then put them back on the train again. It would kill the Southwest Chief. The good news about that is that the Senate acted last week, the Appropriations, Senator Udall of New Mexico and Senator Jory Moran, a Republican from Kansas, put up an amendment to stop that and require Amtrak to invest in that stretch of track so they won't be doing that. So that's the good news. There's a tremendous amount of pushback on Amtrak's ideas that they're going to somehow do something adverse to the long-distance trains. And we continue to work on that issue, and I can tell you, these senators from across the country, especially those in red states, I had a conversation with a senator from Montana, said that if they think they're going to do something to the Empire Builder, this is a Republican on the Appropriations Committee, if they think they're going to do something to the Empire Builder, they won't get a dime for anything. They won't get any money if they kill my train, and that's the attitude, and it's a good attitude to have because that keeps it a national system. So we got some issues. They want to not do as many excursion trains. They don't want to take on private cars like they once did. So those are some things we're very much concerned about. But the good news is Mr. Anderson is not from the railroad industry. Mr. Anderson isn't encumbered by long traditions in the railroad industries to do anything one way in regards to safety in the workplace. And he's hired a guy by the name of Ken Highlander, and we met with him recently as his vice president of safety. And what they're doing, they want to step up safety to a higher level. And I understand Dirk Sampson's in the room here. I think he's got another meeting with Ken Highlander on Friday to talk about close call reporting, C3RS, and other things in the industry. But what they want to do is, my conversations with both Richard Anderson and Ken Highlander is they think discipline on Amtrak is ridiculous. They don't have that on the railroad side of things. So they want to expand C3RS, and they want to do some things as far as discipline. In fact, Ken Highlander said to me, John, I might come to you and try and get a waiver on decertification penalties from the FRA. We think it's outrageous. We don't do that in the railroad or in the airline industry. And this idea of petty discipline and these excessive discipline because of decertification. So that's pretty good stuff. And I keep encouraging them, and Dirk does, and John does, and others, keep going down that trail. Maybe they can set an example for the rest of the industry as far as discipline goes. And instead of discipline, some retraining, some coaching, some things of that nature, things like they do to their own carrier officers, but more often than not, don't do it to our members. I bumped into Matt Igo. He's the head of BNSF, Vice President of Operations, new guy. He was at a STB hearing the other day. And somebody introduced me, and he starts bragging to me that the BNSF is going to hire 2,000 people. And I looked at him, I said, well, maybe if you didn't fire so many, you wouldn't have to hire so many. And he says, well, we're looking at that too. So we need to get them going in the right direction. Yeah, I only got another 6 pages here. You heard this Kevin Broder talk about the Janus decision. And the Janus decision, where they allow, essentially make public employee workplaces all right to work is and he talked about the effects, and we know the effects of right to work. But there's something that I want to say, that one of the reasons why conservatives, Republicans want right to work, and they want things like Janus, and they're doing things on right to work, has to do with politics. They've calculated that when you have an active labor movement in a state or a congressional district, it'll make the difference of 4 to 5% at the ballot box. 4 to 5%. When workers actually engage in these elections, it'll make a difference of 4 to 5%. So one of the things driving this right to work is purely partisan. And we got Janus, of course, and that only applies to the public sector, but if we're talking about freedom of speech and whatnot, and like Kevin said on Monday morning, it's not long before the private sector follows along as well, where you have a situation where you don't have union security clauses, and workers can decide whether or not they're going to pay their union dues or not. It could amount to that 25% of our members decide they're not going to pay their union dues. There could be 50% in some locations, and it would have a dramatic impact on, of course, our ability to operate, whether it be a legislative board, a general committee, the international union. And I think about that when I think about our PAC. And our PAC is, we only have 19% of our members that contribute to our political action committee. 19%. Now, a lot of them don't contribute because they just simply haven't been asked. Nobody explained it to them. And so blame that on us. They never explained it to them, never been asked. That's our fault. A full 60% of our legislative reps don't contribute. What do we got here now? We've got our international officers at 100%, our general committee officers at 53%, state boards and directors at 98%, that should be 100%, and local officers at 39%. So we got local officers at 39%. That's a depressing number. Our PAC does us 2 things for it. First of all, number one, it helps us elect good people to office that'll support our issues and ideals. That's what it does. But the other thing, it gets us access. It gets us access through fundraising events and things like that. I've got Stu Gardner from Ohio right here. How does he go see the governor or somebody running for governor? You make a contribution to the campaign, they have an event, you get to look them right in the eye and ask them what their thoughts are in 2-person group. You look them right in the eye. I do it all the time in Washington, D.C., because we have this PAC. Plus, it helps their campaign. So that's what it does. It gets us access. And none of the money is used for anything but campaign contributions. Nobody gets any wages, no commissions, not things of that nature. We vitally need to do something about this lack of PAC contributions at our union. We need to at least double it. I've been walking around this convention and looking at these name tags. There are a ton of people, I don't know what percentage, I would say 20% of the people at this convention that don't have a little tag on their badge that says they contribute to PAC. That means they don't contribute to PAC, or there's been an error. I found one where there was an error. they don't contribute to PAC. Everybody in this room is a leader. You wouldn't be here if you weren't one of the leaders in our organization. I need our leaders to not only contribute to PAC, we need our leaders for the future of our organization and our ideals, that our leaders not only contribute to PAC, but that our leaders sign up the members in their local, their state board, their general committee to contribute to PAC. I want you to look when you're walking around after this meeting at folks out there. If they don't have a little thing on their tag, I want you to ask them personally, incumbent on everybody in this room, to ask them personally to contribute to PAC. And we've got forms. There's forms all over this table, and there's a $100 bill that is attached to the back of one of these forms. A $100 bill, so make sure you grab the forms. And when you see somebody out in the hallway that doesn't have that something on their tag, I want you to talk to them. I was talking to folks yesterday and signed some folks up. I want to leave with this thought because I know he's squirming around next to me here and time is about up. But when I ride the metro or at the airports, there's oftentimes it says, if you see something, say something. Security thing. If you see something, say something. If you see something, get somebody else to fix it. Now, John Prevasich is at the front of the room here, and I forgot to mention, and it's not been mentioned that I've seen here yet, but I want to thank you, John, personally for the work you and your team did on the national agreement, a good agreement in some really challenging times, and you did it, and it was far beyond what I was thinking it was going to come out of those negotiations. So let's give it up for John Prevasich. But when you see something, say something. John and I get all kinds of emails, somebody seeing something, so they say something and they say, well, that's the end of it. I got John Prevasich or John Risch is going to fix that for me. Well, funny thing is, we can't fix everything. I want you to think instead of when you see something, say something, I want everybody to think of this. When you see something, do something. When you see something, do something. When you see something, when you see that your congressman is not on the crew bill or on the driver assault bill for bus driver, do something. Meet with him. When you see that your local is not contributing adequately to PAC or somebody you know doesn't contribute, do something. Talk to them. See something, do something. The only way we're successful in the future is when we all pull on the wagon. We all pull on the wagon. You guys are our leaders. We desperately need you all to help. Help us pull on this wagon. Help us make a better union for the future. Help us improve the lives and working conditions of our members, because that's the path forward.
Thank you, John. Great talk.